Mercedes' Spanish Grand Prix performance was better than even the most fanatical fan could imagine. They found themselves fighting for third place so far this season, but at the Catalan track on Sunday, they showed what their radical concept car could do. What was it about Spain that made everything click for the Silver Arrows? Stick around to find out. Everyone knew that Mercedes were going to bring upgrades to Barcelona. In fact, it was widely expected that every single team on the grid was going to have something to show on Friday practice. There had been a lot of negative press surrounding Mercedes after Miami. In America, they showed up on the Friday, but their pace then dropped off a cliff on Saturday and Sunday. Many people were saying that if they couldn't get themselves sorted in Barcelona, then that might be the season over for them. Even Toto Wolff was saying that Barcelona could be the last of the year's upgrades. It was meant to be a final Hail Mary, and if they dropped the ball again, they would turn their attention to 2023 instead of fighting for scraps in 2022. I bet he's glad they gave it one more race now. Mercedes were outstanding all weekend in Barcelona. They finished Friday second and third on the timesheet, a result that was worth less than nothing after what happened in Miami. What was important though was that they had stopped bouncing on the straights. There were a whole host of changes to different parts of the floor. The immediately obvious one was a change to the skirt on the car. The actual edge of the floor had changed shape, and so had almost everything from the bottom of the side pod down to incorporate it. Before the race, the comments coming from Mercedes was that their lack of side pods was exposing the floor to too much airflow from above. The consequence was their floor being pushed down too much and porpoising. Presumably, the change to the floor here was intended to try and reduce that effect. There were various other minor modifications around the car as well, all of which were aerodynamic. The combined effect of these changes were that the car stopped porpoising almost completely on the straights. There was also some weight saving done, because what F1 team isn't on a diet at the moment? Like the rest of them, they removed paint to save weight. The exposed carbon is becoming a theme in car design this year and one we strongly endorse. The changes didn't end there though. Mercedes also switched the engines in both of their cars. It's important to note that teams are only allowed 3 engines this year, so if you're swapping one this early, then you better hope that it's going to make a difference. There were upgrades to the engine control systems, which, in combination with the rest of the changes, made the Mercedes competitive once again. Just how competitive? Well, like we said, they went second and third fastest on Friday, and then managed to follow that up with 4th and 6th in qualifying to get them right in the mix for Sunday's race. In qualifying, George Russell, who took 4th place, was still 0.643 seconds slower than pole sitter Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton was another 0.119 behind George, but he put that down to some experiment on Russell's car, which apparently gave him the pace to beat Hamilton. Lewis said that the experiment ultimately ended up being the better way to go in qualifying, meaning he would probably take that on from the next race in Monaco. Whatever they were doing on the cars, the work done gave them their best qualifying performance of the season so far. With that qualifying result, they set themselves up for potentially their best points haul of the season so far. It wasn't quite meant to be though. Hamilton and Haas's Kevin Magnussen collided on the opening lap in a racing incident. When Lewis rejoined at the back of the field after his enforced pit stop, he despondently suggested retiring the car to preserve the engine. Such was the gap to the leaders. "I would save this engine, guys, if I was you. I'm sorry," he said. Not quite the attitude you would expect from someone who constantly posts social media messages about always fighting and never giving up. Fortunately for Hamilton, his team follows him on Instagram and has obviously been reading his inspirational quotes. They told him over the radio that they thought he could still finish in 8th place and told him to come in for some new tyres and get back after the field. While Hamilton made his way back through the field, George Russell was fighting with Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. The young Brit has been the diamond in the rough for Mercedes this season, and he drove another incredible race in Spain. He led the race for periods and kept Max Verstappen at bay for 5 laps before the reigning world champion had to pit for new tyres. George managed to do what he's done all season and just get on with business. Hamilton had been outspoken about the quality of the Mercedes car all season, but by the looks of things, George Russell couldn't care less about how hard the car is to drive. He drove yet another mature and confident race, bagging his 2nd podium of the season when he crossed the line in 3rd place. George hasn't finished outside of the top 5 this season and currently sits 28 points above his teammate in the driver's standings. Something no one would have imagined at the start of the season. Hamilton was actually running in 4th position until 2 laps from the end when both Mercedes cars started to suffer from a cooling issue caused by a water leak. The problem was so bad that Hamilton and Russell were told it was a DNF risk, and they had to lift and coast as much as possible. The track temperature had been well over 35 degrees all the race, and it was no surprise that there weren't more cooling problems for other cars. Hamilton dropped to 5th before the checkered flag, but it was still an outstanding recovery drive from the veteran. It seems a combination of aero upgrades and new engine did the trick for Mercedes. Despite Lewis asking if he could retire less than a lap into the race, he was ecstatic afterwards. "I was thinking it was impossible to get back into points, but the team said no, you're on for 8th, Hamilton said. "I thought they were being super optimistic. I'm glad we didn't retire, and it just shows you never stop and never give up, and that's what I did." A race like that is like a win, and it actually feels better than a win most often when you have come from so far back. In the opening 5 races, Mercedes only had 2 podium finishes. Hamilton in the season opener in Bahrain and Russell in Australia 3 weeks later, with Hamilton often cutting a frustrated and dejected figure. "We have made a lot of improvements with the car and the race pace is much better. The car is much nicer in the race. We have some improvements to make in qualifying," Hamilton said. "If I hadn't had that issue at the start, I would have been fighting with the Red Bulls." Hamilton may have been a little overconfident, claiming he could fight with the Red Bulls in Spain. His average lap pace was still 0.249 seconds slower than Max Verstappen, despite all of that time he spent catching up to the rest of the field at the start of the race. His average race pace was also slower than Sergio Perez as well. Nonetheless, Toto Wolff shared a similar sentiment to Lewis. "That looked like a World Championship winning race car that he was driving, and that would have not been possible in the previous races," said Wolff about Hamilton. "That reminded me of last year and the years before, when a car is really on top of its game." Asked if he therefore believed that Mercedes now believed it could haul itself into the championship fight between Ferrari and Red Bull, Wolff said, "I've seen a race car today that reminded me of the race cars of previous seasons, where you're 30 plus seconds behind the whole field and you come all the way to the front and near the podium. That's very encouraging and shows that we've made another step. Can we fight for a world championship? Well, we bet we can, but we just need to have a car that's able to finish first and second. And I think we have reasons to believe that we can get there." It's a very Will Buxton-esque comment from Wolff to say that if they have a car that can come first and second, they can win the championship. That is how it works after all. The reality of Mercedes' situation though is that they do not have a car that can finish first and second at the moment. The RB18 is just too fast currently, as is Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, though he didn't get a chance to show that in Spain. Even if Mercedes can get the W13 to a point where it can fight for race wins, George Russell is currently 36 points behind Max Verstappen, and Hamilton is another 28 behind him. The Mercedes upgrades obviously restored Hamilton's confidence, and his incredible recovery drive rightfully earned him Driver of the Day. The combination of upgrades and new engine gave Mercedes a competitive edge that got them right up to the fighting at the front. They've gone from being a contender for best of the rest to being able to fight with Ferrari and Red Bull on the right day. Are they going to be in with a shout to win a world championship? No. Will they win races this year? Definitely. Their hard work developing the car has been rewarded, and Mercedes fans everywhere should be looking forward to watching races once again. Want to know more about this season's development race? Then click the video that's showing on your screen and I'll see you there.